Today was a good day. We had our community work day. We got quite a bit done. Some of us worked on firewood, some of us worked on fixing a roof, and others on fixing a sink. There's a long connection of firewood with Buddhism. In the Zen tradition, there's the saying, before enlightenment, hauling water, splitting wood. After enlightenment, hauling water, splitting wood. It's one of the famous Zen sayings. There's also in Zen, there's this story about the master who would work hard every day on various kind of building projects and things, and his disciples were afraid he was getting old and they thought he was overdoing it, so they hid his tools. So he didn't come to the meal, and refused to eat or come to the meal until they give him back his tools. He said, a day without work is a day without food. In the Theravada, we haven't particularly emphasized the value of manual labor, but there's plenty of work in manual work in monasteries. In Thailand, the monks and novices do quite a bit of actual physical work in the course of their day. It's a routine to be. At the very minimum, they're sweeping leaves, but there's often projects to be done, wood to be hauled, buildings to be fixed, repaired. In the Sufi tradition, there's at least some of the Sufis, they if you go to study with a master, first he teaches you a manual skill, like carpentry or stone carving or something, and you don't get any spiritual teaching until you've mastered the manual skill. It might be many years until you're proficient in the skill. Then you're ready for the spiritual teaching. In Tibetan tradition, there's the story of Milarepa. He had very black karma from his previous activities as a sorcerer, and when he went to study with Marpa knew with his psychic power that he had a lot of black karma that he had to work off, and he had Milarepa build a stone house, and he had to drag the stones from the riverbed on his back and build this stone house. And when he was almost finished, Marpa came along and said, "What are you doing, you fool? This is a square house. You don't build a square house for a yogi. It should be a round house. Tear it down, start over." And he tore it down and started over, and then when he was almost finished, Marpa came back and said, "I've changed my mind. I think it should be a pyramid." and he got that almost finished, and Marpa come back and said, "Oh well, I think maybe a square house is actually what we want." But Milarepa then didn't finish. He was despaired of ever getting the teachings, and he didn't finish the square house. He tricked Marpa's wife into giving him his signet ring, and he took Marpa's signet ring and went to Marpa's teacher, was it Naropa, I think, and said, "Marpa sent me, and here's his ring. He said that you should teach me." So because he had stolen the teachings, then he took him many years to accomplish his goal. He had attained the teaching by false pretenses. And in the Tibetan tradition, they call this kind of manual work, they call karma yoga, because you're making karma, you're making good karma, merit by selfless service. And there's also, I think, many spiritual benefits into physical activity, of productive physical activity of this kind. The Buddhist teaching is not only intended for sitting in meditation. This is only a part of the path. It's often highly emphasized in at least initial approach of Westerners to Buddhism, most of us come into it first attracted by the meditation practice. But you soon find there's a lot more to it. It needs to be a practice integrated into the daily life. And a big part of our life as human beings is our work, our livelihood. Right livelihood is one of the factors of the path. And doing productive work is itself a kind of meditation if it's approached correctly. Can teach you a lot. We should be applying to whatever we do the 4 iddhipadas. That's the basis of success, or the roads to power. And this applies to meditation and to any other activity that we undertake. I find it easiest to remember the 4 iddhipada by the Pali names because they start with CCVV. Chitta, Chanda, Virya, Vimamsa. Chitta is the mind, the conscious awareness. And in this context, it refers to having your mind on the task at hand, not having a divided consciousness. And this is very applicable to meditation. In samadhi practice, one of the jhana factors is ekaggata, the singleness of mind, the mind that's gone to singleness, that's unified. The mind is not divided. The mind in jhana is not divided between objects. It's unified on a single object. And whatever we're doing, if our mind is on the task at hand, it's going to be done better. We're going to be more successful. If our mind wanders and we're daydreaming about this or that, when we're stacking wood, the pile falls over. Right? When you're chopping wood, the axe is going to not strike the point you're aiming at. Mind has to be at the task at hand. Chanda is enthusiasm or zeal. Right? And it's an important word in Dhamma for fully understanding the teachings, because there's the Second Noble Truth is translated in English as desire or craving, sometimes translated is the cause of suffering. And the word there is tanha. And some people superficially misinterpret the teaching, and they think not having desire means that you're inert, you're apathetic, you're unable to do anything. And this is simply not understanding the words. Because the word in the case of the Second Noble Truth is tanha, which could be literally translated as thirst, and it's specifically defined as specific kinds of desire. There's a tanha, or desire for sensual experience, is one kind of tanha. Tanha for being and for not being are the other two. And for us as human beings, because we're incarnate in the sensual desire realm, desire for sense experience is the noisiest. It takes up the most mental space, but it's superficial relative to the other two. They're deeper seated, and they're actually more difficult defilements. They're deeply rooted, the desire to be and the desire not to be. So the tanha has a very specific meaning in the Second Noble Truth. It refers to this kind of impetus, this particular kind of craving. Chanda is a more general word that could also be translated as desire. It's the will towards something. And it can be a spiritual negative or positive depending on the object. So there's such a thing as kamachanda, which is desire for sense pleasures, the zeal or enthusiasm for sensuality, which is spiritual hindrance. But there's dhammachanda, the desire or zeal for dhamma, for the experience of dhamma, which is a positive and is a necessary factor. It's a motivating factor. So there's an enthusiasm, a desire, a zeal for that which is wholesome. So in terms of the iddhipada, chanda is the enthusiasm, interest, zeal, attention to what you're doing. One of my favorite little aphorisms I got from Ajahn is, if you can't get out of it, get into it, which has served me well over the years. If there's some task that you can't avoid doing, that you don't want to do, then try to summon up the chanda. Try to take an interest and enthusiasm in it. You know? If I've got to dig this outhouse hole, I'm going to dig the best damn outhouse hole. This is the kind of attitude you got to bring up. Take an interest in what you're doing. Enthusiasm. So you're wholehearted. Your mind is devoted to it with citta, and your heart is into it with chanda. Virya is energy or effort, and this is a spiritual quality of great importance as well. Virya and related factors, Vayamo and my mind's drawing a blank, but there's another term related, that they occur more times than any other factors in the 37 Bodhipakkhadhammas, the list of all wholesome dhammas. There are various permutations of, and the Buddha said the path is to be had by the energetic, not by the idle. So you have to summon up energy. Often, whether it's meditation or it's chopping wood or fixing a roof, the most difficult moment of summoning energy is the initial starting the job. Once you overcome that, and then you find that the energy flows, and you get energy by putting out energy. The more you rouse yourself above your resistance and make that a habit, and the more energy you have in the future. And every time you overcome that reluctance, that inertia of the mind, and rise above it, you gain a little strength. And this kind of moral strength to throw yourself into the task or to the meditation, which is another kind of task. The last iddhipada is vimamsa, which is investigation. And this is very important for whatever we do. I think a good alternate term for this is intelligent curiosity. That you're not blindly following a routine by rote, but you're observing by trial and error the results of your actions and adjust accordingly. And applying all your intelligence and imagination to the simplest tasks, to learn by experience how to do them more efficiently, more effectively. And this applies very much in meditation. The meditation is not something to be done as a rote exercise. This is a form of silabata paramasa, attachment to rites and rituals, or as I heard Ajahn Sucitto translate silabata paramasa. That's one of those words that nobody's really satisfied with the translation. And Ajahn Sucitto's come up with one as systems and structures fondling. for Silabata Paramasa. It's being mechanical, like a robot or a computer program following an algorithm. And it's just that's not how to effectively accomplish anything, particularly not in meditation. There must be an amount of investigation, uh, getting a sense of feel of what works and what doesn't. Some kinds of work that we undertake really require quite a bit of harnessing of all our faculties and powers. So, like thinking of jobs that have a technical component, technical problems to overcome. And today we had the team working on the roof, and we had Lori working on the sink. Those are the kind of jobs where you've got to think it through. You can't rely on simply following a rote routine for something like that. You have to overcome technical issues as you go. And you need also bodily strength and dexterity for these kind of things to manage the material. We're when we do anything in the world, we're manipulating physical matter, right? We're working with the rupa kanda and creating something by rearranging elements in the world. Another aphorism, this one that I always remember, this one comes from Kema Nanda, who was my first teacher. He had the saying that beauty comes from love plus attention to detail. So if you want to build something beautiful, you have to start with love. This is like an aspect of chanda, of enthusiasm. You want to make something nice. And that alone is not sufficient. You can have all the good intentions in the world and still produce a piece of junk. You have to, as you go, you have to have attention to detail, which is vimamsa. Now every little detail, pounding the nails into the board, you pound them straight. You line up the material. Everything is done. The cumulative effect of all these little details ends up being something very appealing. I was also thinking of about firewood in particular. It's a task that we do every year, and I've now been here for 20 years. I hesitate to try and calculate how many pieces of wood I've chopped. And every year we do a minimum of 10 cords of wood, sometimes 20 cords, like this year. That's a lot of wood, and each single piece of wood is handled multiple times. Right? By the time we get it here, it's already been handled a few times by the loggers. And then we cut it up into pieces, and we split it, and then we load it into a truck or a cart, and we take it out to the kutis and stack it. And that's not done yet, because then who's ever staying in the kuti takes the wood and puts it in the fire and burns it. And finally, the ashes are taken out and dumped. So it's multiple times each single piece is handled. And it seems like a massive job. I don't know if anyone here when the 20 cords arrived this year? Besides myself, anyone? No, so you haven't seen the full 20 cords. It looks like a mountain of wood, and we deal with it. We get it done. And that's part of that is persistence, which is the important spiritual quality. Is the persistence? This applies to the meditation. You just have to stay at it. It's like when you start meditating, the pile of defilements seems enormous, seems unbeatable. this enormous pile of defilements, but you just keep working at it, and it's nicked away little by little, like the wood is cut up. The defilements are sliced up and chopped and seen there for what they are. The simple act of chopping wood could be taken as an archetype for any kind of task. One thing that we learn from it is anatta, selflessness. It's one phenomena that's often observed is that if you put yourself out of the picture, if you're just chopping and there's no one chopping, then you're more effective. You don't miss fire. You chop the wood cleanly. People who play sports, they know this as being in the zone. Right? You're out of the way. You're just running or just throwing the ball, and there's no sense of ego or self or desire to accomplish. It's just the pure action. This also shows us a very clear indication of impermanence. We're doing all this work in the fall to get the firewood ready, and you made that nice stack of wood around this building and in the library, carefully piling up the wood, and then someone's going to come along and undo all your nice work and burn it. This is impermanent. These structures are inherently impermanent, and that whole enormous pile of wood ends up being a very small pile of ash in a few months' time. And there's the job needing to be done all over again, which is part of the demonstration of dukkha and the futility of samsara. That whatever we accomplish in samsara it's like a house of cards. It all falls apart. But we do it anyway. This is what I was talking about in a couple of recent talks, approaching from different angles. That to keep separate understanding of the conventional mundane level of reality and the ultimate transcendental level, and to not use the transcendental level as an excuse for avoiding the mundane, and also not to mistake the mundane for the transcendental. This is a paradox that is worked with quite a bit in Zen. This is the underlying the koan of why did Bodhidharma go east? It's a simpler way of expressing that would be to ask the question, why bother? We know it's all ultimately, anything in the conditioned realm is ultimately impermanent, suffering, void of real substance and purpose. But we do it anyway. And we don't not only do it, but we throw ourselves into it with enthusiasm. The mundane world has no ultimate meaning or purpose, but we have to act as if it did. It's part of the paradox of existence. And everything we do with body, speech, or mind in the conditioned realm, we're making all the time, we're making karma. Every action, intentional action, as a weight of karma. Every thought actually has a weight of karma. And every spoken word and every action has an increasingly heavy weight of karma. One way of analyzing karma is that there are 4 kinds of karma. There's the bright karma with bright results. There's dark karma with dark results. There's mixed karma with both bright and dark results. and there is the karma that leads beyond karma, which is meaning to realize the unconditioned, which is a realm beyond karma. So what we do towards the end of awakening is the karma that leads to the unconditioned, leads out of the realm of karma. The category of bright and dark is an important one to remember, because in this imperfect world, this samsaric conditioned existence, most of what we do ends up being somewhere in that gray area. And it's incumbent on us to try and make it as bright as possible. But it's not possible in this world to be absolutely pristine, purely bright in the mundane conditioned activity, because there's always unintended consequences. If we understand that, that saves us from a lot of unnecessary remorse. If we just try and do the best we can, and try and remember the underlying principle that our actions should be towards reducing suffering, reducing the net total of suffering in the world, suffering of self and others, and we'll be all right. Try and maintain that as a guiding principle in making ethical decisions. So I think I'm kind of running out of things to say on this topic, so I'll close it off.